y'all just come and sit whenever you want to. Please continue to look at the books, but we are going to get started. I'm Candace Ben Wonderham. I'm the Director of Student Services here at Vestavia Hills City Schools, and thank you for coming to our Erin's Law Parent Awareness Meeting. As some of you may or may not know, in 2015, the state legislature passed this law, and it requires school systems to develop appropriate curriculum for our kids to protect them against sexual abuse. We have to deliver that curriculum 4 times in a student's career, and 1 in each cluster. So that's K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. We spent the last year planning this delivery and what grades we were going to choose to deliver the curriculum in. And ultimately, our elementary principals were very involved. They actually got to go and see a presentation at OLS last year, and we chose 2nd, 4th, 7th, and then the health classes. So we know most of the health classes are 10th grade, but there will be a little bit of varying difference in those classes. We are very fortunate to partner with Deb Schneider at CHIPS, and that's the Children's Hospital Intervention and Prevention Services, and Deb Schneider is the Executive Director of that program. So we're really excited to have her. Today she's going to talk a little bit about the lessons. Do we have any secondary parents? Okay, just want to make sure.
So all 2nd and 4th
2nd, 4th.
are here. Okay, that's 7th prayer.
And it's
Wow.
7th.
And 7th. Okay, perfect. All right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, if you will hold questions till the end because we are videotaping this session. Thank you.
Well, thank y'all for being here. So is this faculty and staff side, or there's some parents over here? Okay, all right. So I'm Deb Schneider. The kids all call me Miss Deb because my last name is Schneider. And if they're all going Mrs. Schneider, they're all making faces at me and it gets a little overwhelming. Tell me about you. Raise your hand if you are a parent of a student. All right, are there any grandparents? Erin, okay. I'm a grandma too. All right, I just wanted to see the audience. First of all, thank you for being here, because any caregiver that is an advocate for their children, I love you. Because we need caregivers to be advocates for their children. So I'm going to talk with the term caregiver, because I have custody of my granddaughter. So I'm mom, but grandmother too, and so we have children that are at the schools that live with aunts or uncles or grandparents. We have some kids in foster care. So if that's okay with you guys, if I use the term caregiver, I'm meaning you guys too, as well as faculty and staff, because they're caregivers for our students as well. So CHIPS is Children's Hospital Intervention and Prevention Services. It's a nice way to say we're the child abuse center for the hospital. 1 in 10 children will experience some form of sexual abuse before the age of 18. So that could be anything from an obscene phone call, someone exposing themselves, to full-blown on sexual abuse or sexual assault. And so that number is so high, and that the hospital, we see kids from all over the state. In 1995, the hospital started CHIPS. I was one of the founding members because we knew we were not addressing suspected sexual abuse the way that we needed to. We needed trained personnel. We needed people that were dedicated to this area. And, you know, we've got great docs at the hospital that deal with asthma and cancer, but we needed docs that were focused on sexual abuse. So the center was started in 1995. We started with suspected sexual abuse. We added the counseling component later, and we provide counseling for children that are identified as the victims, possibly their siblings if they need it, and then the non-offending caregivers. So we do not provide therapy components at CHIPS for people that may have been accused. We then added the physical abuse component, and we also see severe failure to thrive. So the worst of the worst neglect cases. We also deal with those at CHIPS. So our team consists of specially trained physicians, specially trained nurses, specially trained social workers and counselors. So I did I started this in 1995. I was the founding social worker on the team, and then left to go work part-time and worked for one of the district attorney's offices. And in that area, they wanted me to start prevention education at the schools. So I've been doing it since the 1990s. Then got my kids kind of raised and went back to CHIPS part-time as a therapist, then became the assistant director, and then in 2010 became the director. And when my vice president interviewed me for the position, he said, what are you going to bring to the table that the former director hasn't already brought about child abuse? And I said, prevention in the community, because I know how important it is to talk to children and empower them. It's not a scare tactic, especially with the older kids, because you can't scare teenagers, 7th graders and up. You cannot scare them into anything. They just go click if you're trying to scare them. So it's all an empowerment program. You can show videos, we can hand them books, but my lessons are interactive. So when I start out, we build some rapport. I tell them who I am. I tell them that I'm not a doctor and a nurse, that I have this great job where I get to talk to kids about their feelings, and I teach a safety plan. So I get the kids in the audience, they raise their hands, they tell me something that makes them happy, something that makes them sad, something that makes them mad, something that makes them feel afraid. And we, laugh, or, oh, your dog died, or I'm sad because, my grandmother passed away, and we all, share those feelings. And then I tell them about one of the doctors that I work with that's petrified of spiders. And I tell her story, and we all laugh, and I tell them, I'm not telling you this story to make fun of her. I'm telling you this story about this doctor that I work with that's afraid of spiders. I mean, to the point, like, fake spiders, too. Because I want them to understand that grown-ups have feelings, too. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Then they tell me the rules in their classroom or at their school. Keep your hands and feet to yourself, raise your hand when the teacher's talking, no running in the hall. They'll say the golden rule, treat people like you want to be treated. And then I'll ask them, what happens if you forget or break the rule? And they'll say, you move your clip down. You get a note home. You got to go to the principal. And then some of the older ones, you might get suspended. You might get expelled. And so we talk about the reason for the consequences are to help you remember the rules. Then we'll talk about kids have rules and grown-ups have rules and laws. And I tell them my most recent speeding ticket, and I had 189 reasons to remember not to speed on South Shades Crest and Hoover anymore. And then I tell them, and the 190th reason is I could have put someone in danger. The 191st reason is I could have put myself in danger. What do we have rules for? And the answer I'm looking for is to keep us safe. And they might give me variations of that, but the goal is to keep us safe. So then I remind them, everyone has feelings, including grown-ups. We have rules and laws to keep us safe. And they give me the agree sign or whatever that school's little thing is. Then we'll go into safety plans. So I ask them, based on their age, 7th graders should know the fire drills, and they've practiced since kindergarten. If I'm talking to kindergartners, we talk about crossing the street. But when I'm talking to 2nd grade, I'll say, what do you do at your school if there's a fire? And they'll raise their hands and, stop, drop, and roll. Or they'll say, we get out, we got to be quiet. And then I'll get real dramatic and go, if there was a fire drill right now, does Miss Deb need to start grabbing all her stuff? Do we need to start getting the books? Do we need to get the computers? And they're like, no, like, this lady's crazy. No. And I say, how come? Because that might put us in danger, because that's just stuff. And then I'll, go, yeah, I can go buy this and I can get that, but can I go to Target and buy another one of you? No, because you're special. So again, that they're special, that they're irreplaceable, they're important. Then we'll go to tornado. What do you do during a tornado? And they'll tell me their plan. What do you do if there's an intruder or a lockdown? And I'll find out exactly what the schools call the codes. And they love to tell me that because that plan has a lot to it. If you're in the cafeteria, you do this. If you're in the classroom, you do this. If we're in the library, you do that. And they love to share that with me. And then I'll go, do you practice those plans? And they'll say, yeah. How come? Oh, reminder, I use terrible grammar when I'm talking to the kids. I do not ask the question why, because I try not to ask children why questions. And then in a minute, I'll tell you my other poor grammar. And I make a big deal about that too, that I'm standing in a school with teachers and I'm using poor grammar. So I want them to tell me they need the practice, so if it really happened, and based on their age, they'll say, you know, we'll be ready, or we're prepared, or you want it to pop into your brain, Miss Deb, what you need to do. And I'm like, yeah, you don't want to be that kid that's like, is that a fire drill or a tornado drill? I don't know the plan, what am I supposed to do? So that's why they're practiced. And then I share with them that we practice those same drills at the hospital. For fire, for tornado, and intruders. We do the same drills, and grown-ups have to practice them too. And I might get a question here or there, well, what do you do if there's a fire and they're, you know, in the beds? And I tell them, you know, what we do at the hospital. And that's why we have to practice, so we, you know, we can be prepared. And then I'll tell them, remember Ms. Deb said she's here to teach you another safety plan. And then based on their ages, fourth I do this with also, so fourth and second, I'll ask them what their eyes are for, their nose, their hands. And then I'll say, everybody in this room, I can see everyone's faces. I can see everyone's hands. Some people I can see your legs. Some people, because it's still warm and some of us are still wearing sandals, I can see your feet. And those parts of our body, people see. Pretty much every day somebody can see that. But there's other parts of our body that we call private. And then I'll get, oh, she just said that. And I let them laugh. And we laugh because it's kind of funny that we're talking about it. And then I'll ask them what the word private means to them. And I might get, you know, when I'm going to the bathroom, when I'm writing in my journal, when I'm changing clothes, and they'll give me their definitions of it. And then I just have a sign I bought at Walmart that says private property, no trespassing. And I'll compliment them that they were able to think of what private meant. But Ms. Deb's got to have a sign. And then we talk about, is that a message? Do people know what I mean when I say private property, no trespassing? And they might say, oh yeah, we have one of those at the lake house, or they'll give me some example of it. And then I'll tell them that we didn't start wearing clothes to be cute and handsome back in the dinosaur days, or whatever grade I'm talking to. We started wearing clothes to cover up our private parts. You know, we get the giggles. And then I'll let them calm down from that, and then I'll say, okay, everybody, think about going swimming. And you put on a bathing suit. And girls, it could be a one piece, and I get real dramatic, pulling up the one piece, but it's covering your private parts. Even if it's a bikini, if it's a two-piece, it's still covering your private parts. And then I'll get, but boys don't have top private parts. They can show them. And I'm like, you are right. And in Vestavia, and in Alabama, and in America where we live, sometimes boys can show their top private parts when they're swimming, sometimes when they're jogging, sometimes when they're playing basketball, sometimes when they're fishing, and we get past that. But no one should be messing with private parts. And there's my bad grammar again, messing. It's so Southern, but it means so many things. And then I make them laugh again. And we identify private parts. Top private parts, front private parts, back private parts. And they fall out. And I give them permission to laugh. So the other day, I was at Brookwood Mall in Macy's. And I'm assuming it was a Homewood student, because I've just finished at Homewood. And I was in the shoe department with my daughters. And I saw this little girl, and I'm assuming with her dad. She was with a man, and he was looking at shoes, and she looked at me and stared at me for a second, and because I'm a kid-friendly person, maybe inappropriate, I just, you know, gave her a little smile and a wave, and she waved back, and then she kind of moved from her dad and came close to me, and then she looked at me and she went, just had communicated that she had this class, but she was the one to let me know. She knew who I was, and she now talked about private parts, and she was good to go. So my daughters were like, "Oh my God!" they thought it was funny, but they were like, and then they thought it was so sweet. They were like, "Mom, she got it." And she was able to recognize you, even in the store and let you know that she got what you were talking about. So when we say messing with, that's the hardest part to me because it means so much more than touching. And based on the cases that we see at CHIPS, and we work with the FBI, we work with law enforcement, there's so many kids being exposed to inappropriate images. There's so many kids that don't realize that that is part of the safety plan. So if we're doing okay at that point, then I'll introduce to them what messing with means. And I ask them to keep their feelings in their fingers. Because if they're going, "Ew, gross, Miss Deb, that's disgusting, yuck," then they're not listening and the kids beside them can't hear. So we take 2 deep breaths, and then I ask them to keep their feelings in their fingers. And we talk about, it could be that they're trying to stare at your private parts. And they'll go, "Yeah, when I was in the bathroom, so-and-so was trying to look up, under the stall." And then I'll go, "They just need to be reminded of the rules. They know that that's a private area and they need to be reminded of the rules." It might mean that they're trying to touch your private parts. It could mean they are touching your private parts. It could mean they're trying to take pictures or video of your private parts. It could mean that they're trying to show you on a screen, an iPad, the computer, the television, their phone, in a book or a magazine, people messing with each other's private parts. It could mean they're trying to get you to mess with their private parts, or they're trying to get you to bring somebody else into that messing with private parts. And then we shake it out. We shake it out. And we take 2 more deep breaths, and I go, "That's why Miss Deb says messing with, because it means so many things." Then we talk about the safety plan. I said, and because there are people that want to mess with kids' private parts, we've got to have another safety plan. Just like you know what to do if there's a fire. Just like you know what to do if there's a tornado. Just like you know what to do if there's an intruder. And then we do the plan. You try to say no. You try to get away. You tell someone, and it's not your fault. Never, ever, ever. Now, I've been doing this for years. I've been trained numerous times. I've read, I've gone to conferences, I've taken classes, but the people that I've learned from the most are the children that have already experienced this. And we learned the hard way years ago, because we used to say no, get away, tell. Well, if the kids didn't say no, or they couldn't get away, and they did get messed with, they didn't tell, because they didn't follow the plan, and they thought they were going to be in trouble. So that's why we stress try to say no, try to get away. When you tell, Ms. Deb asked for it to be a grown-up that lives on this earth, that you can see. I've added over the years, it needs to be a human. And the reason I say that, one sweet pea raised their hand. Miss Deb, I know who I tell. God, Jesus, and Santa Claus. I was like, wow, you picked some powerful folks. God, Jesus, and Santa Claus. But remember, Miss Deb needs someone that lives on this earth. You can talk to God and Jesus about everything and anything. But if someone's messing with your private parts, you pray to God and Jesus to give you the power to tell. Tell the grown-up. Santa Claus, you only see once a year, and if you're sitting on Santa Claus's lap, do you really want to spend your time talking about someone's messing with your private parts, or do you want to be asking the gifts that you want? I had one child say they would tell the president. I was like, whoa, yeah, you went to the highest, ranking, official in the United States. But you don't really see the president every day. Yes, I do. I watch the news every day and see the president on the news. But do you get to talk to the president? So I'm prepared for their answers. Typically, they're going to say mom and dad. I asked for 3. I asked for 3 trusted adults that they can identify. And I asked for one not to be in their family. because I want them to be able to identify people in other places. And so if someone says teacher, and then someone else raises their hand, I'll go, oh wow, who else at your school could you talk to? Counselor, principal, my coach, the nurse, and get them to identify people. The reason I have to say humans is I've had this happen on more than one occasion. They will tell their dog, because they will tell their dog to sick the person. And so I try to emphasize your dog's not with you all the time to help you. So they need to find an adult to talk to. I had one girl, she was so sweet, she said, I would tell my horse. And she owned a horse, and they lived on a big piece of land, and every afternoon she would brush her horse and talk about the good things from her day and the bad things. So she would tell her horse. Aliens. They think some power source, an alien can come protect them. So I stress the adults, and we go over and over that several times. People that want to mess with kids' private parts trick children. Just like fishing, like we get the phishing scams, it happens to the kids too. And when I grew up, I think I'm the oldest person in the room. When I grew up, the only training I got, and my mother is still alive, so if you see us together, don't shame her, because I tell her, she goes, you tell people I didn't teach you? And I said, I tell them, you taught me not to take candy from a stranger. But most of the time, someone that wants to mess with a kid's private parts is not a stranger. It's someone that they know. And a lot of the time, it can be someone in their family. And that's what makes it harder to tell. So part of what we do when we're interacting is they practice telling. We do scenarios. I call them practice pretends. They're basically drills. Now, admittedly, it was not anyone from Vestavia. I had a parent call me and go, I see that you're coming to my child's school. I see that you do practice pretends. So you're going to possibly be throwing my daughter onto the ground and straddling her and acting like you're sexually assaulting her. And I was like, no ma'am. No, nothing like that. It's all verbal. The only thing I might do is I might put my hands on their shoulders, and I get permission ahead of time. So I have puppets that help me. So this is Bubbles. Bubbles is the smartest fish in the world, and I'll get it. But still, that fish is not real. I know, it lives in my car, but it helps me explain things, and it gives you something to look at. And we'll talk about going fishing. And I'll ask them, what do you put on the hook? And I'll get worms, crickets, little fish. We use bacon, maybe a piece of cheese, maybe bread with peanut butter on it. And the reason you do that is it's called bait. But remember, Bubbles is the smartest fish in the world. Bubbles knows not to take the bait. But you put the bait on there because you want to get the fish's attention. It might be something they're curious about. They might like the way it looks. They might just think they need it or they just want it. And if they take that bait, what might happen? They might get caught, Miss Deb, they might get caught. But remember, Bubbles knows not to take the bait. People that want to mess with kids' private parts use bait. But not worms and crickets and things like that. They use things that kids like. So I get them to tell me what kids like. Toys, candy, money, clothes, shoes, electronics. One class, I couldn't quite understand what the child was saying, and they were saying free Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi! Free Wi-Fi! I was like, yeah, anything to do with electronics. They might promise to take you to the zoo. They might promise to take you to the movies. They might promise to buy you something. But sometimes there's bait you don't like. And it might be bait you don't like. And then we talk about, this is my friend, and I use this with the fourth graders too, but we kind of make fun of it, and I tell them it's just a visual aid. This is Shelly. Shelly doesn't know the safety plan. Shelly doesn't know what to do if someone's trying to mess with her private parts. How do you think she's feeling? And I'll get, she's feeling sad, Miss Deb. She's angry. She's confused. She feels weird. She's upset. And she'll go into her shell. And then I'll tell them that the kids I talk to tell me that's how they feel. Kids that have someone's tried to or they've messed with their private parts, they feel like a turtle stuck in a shell. And then this is my kind of evaluation. Because with the second graders and the fourth graders, they're gonna teach Shelley the plan. They're gonna teach Shelley the bait. They're gonna teach Shelley how to tell. And so by the second time I've seen them, then we're gonna be successful in teaching Shelley and get her out of the shell. And then we happy dance and we do all sorts of crazy things. My other puppet is this is Clammy. Because people that want to mess with kids' private parts, they want you to keep it a secret. And so she'll say, keep it a secret, keep it a secret. And we'll do examples of good secrets and bad secrets. Years ago too, we learned the hard way. We used to say good touches and bad touches. And like I just showed you, messing with means a lot more than touching. And sometimes the touches felt good. So if you're telling kids, if it's a bad touch, you know, you need to tell somebody, but if the touch doesn't hurt, then they didn't tell. So we stopped using good touches, bad touches years ago too. To do the practice pretends, I play several different people because a lot of times my kindergartners, sometimes up to my second graders, they think it's a man that wants to mess with his private parts. He wears all black. He has a mustache. He must wear a cape. He has a hat on. And then the kids say the most wonderful things to me, and they help me so much. I have one little boy who goes, and Miss Deb, music plays. And I went, music plays? He goes, yeah, dun, dun, dun. So the little ones think it's an obvious villain. And so I even tell that story to the fourth graders, and they giggle. But to say, see guys, even the little kids think it's someone that's so obvious. So then I'll tell them it can be a grown-up man or a grown-up lady. It can be a teenage boy or a teenage girl. It could be another kid. It might be a kid your age. It could even be a kid a little younger. And you just need to use the plan. Try to say no, try to get away, tell someone it's not your fault. We talk about accidental touches, excuse me touches, and helping touches. If I'm changing a baby's diaper, am I messing with her private parts or helping her? And they'll go, ooh, stinky diapers, but you're helping her, thank goodness. And then I'm very animated, in case you can't tell. Someone that's, you know, sitting, I'll act like I trip and fall. And I'll go, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And I'll go, I just hit them in their private parts. I'm so sorry, I just tripped and fell. Are you okay? Is that something they need to run go tell, or was that an accident? That was an accident, Miss Deb. That was an accident. So we try to identify that. We'll talk about lining up from the playground and somebody's not paying attention. They're over here digging in the dirt and they come running to line up and they hit everybody in the dominoes and they've all just bumped each other's private parts. Is that an accident or someone messing with your private parts? And then we'll talk about, but if I hit your private parts accidentally this morning and then later in the hallway I hit another private part and then later I'm saying something about your private parts, is that an accident or on purpose? No, Miss Deb, that's on purpose. What do you need to do? You need to go tell. So we do that. When we practice pretend, I give different scenarios and I use bait. My granddaughter is not very happy because she saw that I had her too many Build-A-Bears in my bait bag. She goes, those are my bears. She's in kindergarten. I said, I'm using them to help teach the kids. Is that okay? As long as you bring them back. So we'll use things. And I have fake money, but I pull my wallet out. And I ask the children, I'll pick a name and make sure that is not the name of one of the kids. So I had, for years, been using the name Stacy for years, and now my new boss's name is Stacy, but Stacy's a cousin from Atlanta, an older cousin, and Stacy, when I have the hat on, I'm Stacy. When I take the hat off, who am I? You're Miss Deb. And then we practice, who am I, who am I? And Stacy comes to visit, and Stacy says she missed their birthday. And Stacy, so based on how much money I have on me, might be a 10 or a 20, Stacy pulls out money and says, oh, I'm so sorry I missed your birthday. Later I'll take you to the mall and you can pick out whatever you want. And then we'll talk about, you know, going to the mall. And then Stacy will say, how old are you? And if I say to the 7th graders, God, what are y'all in 10th grade now? And they say yes. Then the hat comes off and I'm Miss Deb, because they should never lie about their age. Because We got a lot of 7th grade kids that look a lot older than they really are. And so I'll tell them, if you're lying about your age and saying you're older than you are, then how are the people going to expect you to act? And they're like, they're going to expect you to act 16 if you're saying you're 16. So I try to get them not to lie about their age, including the little ones. And then Stacy compliments the girls about how tall and gorgeous they are, and the boys look so muscular. And you know, sometimes when you're talking 2nd grade boys, they're about this big. My son, you could blow, and he would fall over. He was so little. And so we talk about her complimenting them, and then she tells them, you know, since I'm the oldest cousin in the family, it's my job to teach you how to be ladies and teach you how to be men. So before we go to the mall and spend that money, let me just see how you're growing, and let me see how your private parts are looking, and see if they're looking like they're supposed to. And I'll get that 1 second pause, and then they'll go, no, no, and then they'll act like they're getting away. And then Stacy comes back. And I'll compliment them, and I'll ask them what the bait was. She tried to give us money. She said she'd take us to the mall. Some of my older kids will go, she said we could buy whatever we wanted. That's more bait. The compliments, it's bait. It's all to reel them in. And then Stacy will come back and ask them to keep it a secret. Hey, you're my favorite little cousins. Let's pinky swear that you're not going to tell that I want to look at your private parts. And this time she offers them more money. And so they'll scream no again. And I'll take the hat off and I'll misstep again. What does she do then? She wanted us to keep it a secret. Is that a good secret or a bad secret? That's a bad secret, Miss Deb. Is that a secret you keep or tell? It's a secret that you tell. And then we practice telling. So then I'm Grandma. Grandma's over there. The point of the practicing telling is, like I told you before, I want them to understand that grown-ups have feelings too. Because the videos that we used to show years ago, the child would tell on the video, and this is how the adult would react. Thank you for telling me that my brother, every other weekend when he babysat you, was messing with your private parts. Thank you for letting me know. Is that really how an adult would act? So when I talk to adults, I challenge the adults to win Academy Awards, win the Oscar, try to hold those feelings in, but oh my gosh, you're humans. So I prepare the kids for the adults' reaction. They might cry, they might yell, they might be sad, but what always happens is the grown-up asks a bunch of questions. And kids think when a grown-up's having a strong feeling and asking a bunch of questions that they're in trouble. So we try to prepare them for that. I try to get them to learn how to get the grown-up's attention. Because a lot of kids say, well, I tried to tell, but, and I'm going to stereotype, forgive me, Daddy was watching football. Mommy was on the phone. When I do Grandma, I'm vacuuming. And I try to see how they get my attention. Either they're yelling, or I have kids that'll pull, like pretend like they pull the plug, or they'll tap me. And however they get my attention, my immediate reaction is, I just vacuumed right there, and you just tracked all that in. Because I don't know they're coming to tell me something terrible, happened, or someone's tried to do something. And so then we'll see how the conversation goes. I don't ever bring a child up to help that doesn't want to come up, and I don't bring them up alone. So there'll be other kids up there with them. One of my greatest challenges is that everybody wants a turn to come up. So some of the scenarios are they're a big group. They're at a party, and the older brother puts in an inappropriate movie. And they tell, but the mom at that party says, oh, thank you for telling me that my older, child was showing that inappropriate movie. But when you go home, let's just not tell your family that that happened. And a lot of kids will tell me they wouldn't tell because they want to be able to go back to that friend's house. They are scared that they might have seen part of the movie. And so now they're scared they're in trouble. So all the scenarios, there are particular purposes to them, and all of it is to help empower them. And then some kids are going to use the anatomically correct words because that's what they've learned at home. There's no punishment for that. There may be laughter in the class, and I just say, That word is called anatomically correct. I call it the doctor words. I said, but some kids don't know those words or they're not comfortable with those words. So private parts is okay too. Or if they're using a slang word to tell, then I will address that maybe I don't know what they're talking about. Because at my house, maybe that's not the words we used. So I did have a counselor that helped me with that because of the slang word that they used in this particular home. And then when I was at that school, she would tell the kids, you know, we had this silly little nickname that we used, but people may not know what I'm talking about. Pocketbook is a term that has been around forever for the front private part. And I pick on Sanford because my husband works there. And if you're straight out of the School of Education at Sanford University and it's your first year teaching and a little girl comes up to you and says, Miss Schneider, my uncle's been messing with my pocketbook. To that teacher, she may respond, well, he shouldn't be trying to get in your purse. Is he trying to take your money or your chapstick or your candy? But to that little child, they've just disclosed to a caregiver that's supposed to help them. But do you see how the communication just got lost? So either the anatomically correct words or private parts. I'm saying private parts because this is new. And it's not my job to teach anything but private parts. Even though I have one of my dogs going, are you kidding me, Deb? You're not using the anatomically correct words. I'm like, I'd like to stay in the schools because this is important. That can be taught at home when the parents are comfortable with it. Then we end with, you know, if they are successful with being able to say the plan, identifying adults that they can go to, understanding how someone might feel. With the fourth graders, and I also talk about bullying, because a kid might come to school and they may tell their best friend, hey, you know, my uncle messed with my private parts, that's why I missed school a couple of days ago, blah, blah, blah. And then we talk about the difference between telling a secret and getting help. So if that happened to me and I tell my best friend, hey, that's why I missed school the other day, can you believe that happened to me? And then I go to the library and she spreads it all through the class, and then I get the kids to act like they're bullying me, whispering, pointing fingers, and then I'll ask them, what is that a form of? And they'll say gossip, bullying. And then I stress, kids that find the power to tell, if someone's trying to mess with their private parts, they are heroes. Because people that mess with kids' private parts don't pick one kid. They pick as many kids as they can. So if that kid found the power to tell, then they're a hero. They shouldn't be picked on. The 7th graders and typically 10th graders, we do a scenario where a kid is going to New York and very excited, and but then mentions to her best friends that the uncle's been trying to mess with her private parts and now he's taking her off alone. And then hopefully, if I'm doing a good job, the kids that are helping me with the practice pretend the scenario will go, well, no, you don't need to go on that trip, and you know, you need to tell somebody. And then I'll say, this is my secret. You are my best friends. Please do not tell, or I'm not going to be able to go on this trip. And then we just see how they would handle it. If they would go and tell someone, or if they encourage the friend to go and tell someone. So I try to show them the difference between when they need to go tell. Because about 4th grade, they start telling a friend first if there's something weird or icky or strange. And so then I tell them, even if this doesn't happen to you, I want you to be prepared in case a friend comes to you, or your little brother or sister or a cousin. Someone might come to you and say, I don't know what to do. But if you've learned the plan and you've taught it, then they should be able to share it. If kids are uncomfortable, or they're going, this is just weird, Miss Deb, you know, I can't believe you're doing this, then I'll just remind them, is there a fire at your school every day? No. But do you know what to do if there is? Yeah. Is there a tornado in Vestavia every day? No. but do you know what to do if there is? Yeah. Is there an intruder at your school every day? No, but you know what to do if there is. And then hopefully if we're having good weather, I point out most people are like the weather. Most people are really, really nice. But we all know what to do if there's a bad storm or tornado coming. And you just need to be prepared. Get it all? Okay. So now that I've overwhelmed you, and this is why I talk to the kids, the little ones, twice, because it's a lot of information. And then when I talk to them twice, it helps me build on things. So I don't have to throw everything at them at once. And then it's a, I don't know if it's still a teaching term, it's authentic assessment. If they're answering questions or they're asking me questions, I know if they're getting it or not. If they're hesitant, you know, I'll just re-emphasize something. All right, ask away.
Well, I was gonna ask, all the scenarios that you gave, do you cover like Stacy the cousin, all these things from second grade through fourth and
The
through
scenarios
seventh?
are just a little different. Like, I don't get as intense with the second graders. The seventh graders, based on the school, I might even include human trafficking, but I get the schools okay or not. The 10th graders, we do talk about it. The reason I talk to the kids in seventh grade as I can, and it should be even younger, is human traffickers are approaching 11 and 12-year-olds. And it's not just the movie Taken. They're at the mall, they're at the movie theaters, and the two things that you can get that age kid with, and college students, and I tell them this story too, is money and fame. Because everything's about, look at me, social media, everything. So the scenarios are based on the age. When I get a little older, grandma, when they tell, and I will do this in fourth grade if I feel like they're getting it, grandma says, Stacy's my oldest grandchild. Stacy's part of this family. This is our family business. We will not be discussing this again. And then I drop the shawl and I look at the other kids and my helpers are up here and I go, what do they do? What do they do? And they go, they need to tell somebody else. They need to tell somebody else. And that's why I like them to be able to identify one person outside the family, just in case. Or if that's happening at school or at the ball field or whatever. And so when I talk to adults, I encourage you to help your kids identify. Because, you know, we did it. We got one kid that needs to be at baseball and one kid doing dance pictures. And so I might have tagged another mom, you know, hey, until I can get back to the baseball field. So that's their identified person to go to. And they're so good at identifying their trusted adults. They are so good at that. Other than these little mishaps of the president, Santa Claus, and so that, you know, I redirect those. Who else?
Do you address like YouTube and things like that?
Yes. Yes, we'll talk about internet safety. With my fourth graders, I talk about a little girl that we saw at CHIPS. And she was home alone for about 45 minutes in the afternoon till her mom got there and got into a chat room. And the bait and the lure, the guy was telling her, she said whoever her favorite singer was. And so I think the actual singer was Carrie Underwood. And this is what he said to her in the chat room. Well, I know Carrie Underwood's manager. And she told him that she had been abused. So again, made her more vulnerable. And so he was just getting information out of her. She had no idea she was giving. And this is the way he asked it. He said, well, I want your mom to be there when I bring you the jacket that Carrie Underwood signed. So tell me when your mom's going to be home. And so then I'll ask the students, what do you think he really wanted to know? And usually they're able to tell me he wanted to know when she really wasn't going to be home. And so we talk about the safety with that. With the 7th and I'm going to say 10th graders, but the high schoolers, it's the same thing with the traffickers. They'll find out information. With my older kids, with my high schoolers, I tell them it was a research study, and they were college students, and they were majoring in criminal justice. And they were approached by someone with a clipboard and said they were gonna film a reality TV show. Are you familiar with the study? Yeah, and they agreed to go over to, and it's a stereotype too, a white van. They go over to this white van, because kids will go, you need to stay away from white or black vans, Miss Dell. And they go over to the van, and they say they're doing a sound check, and they need to get their identifying information. And they hand over their purses and wallets and their cell phones, and then step into the van. And then the other researchers in the van and says, why? What did you do this for? Money and fame. And then they're like, oh man, I'm a criminal justice major and I just fell for this. So especially my older kids, my 7th and 10th graders, I tell that story because, you know, they're like, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to fall for this bait that Miss Deb's talking about. They're invincible. So I just try to show them that it can happen to college students too. And then my older kids, I'll say, you know, anybody, even me, and I'm an old grandma that teaches this. If something like that was happening to me, I couldn't handle it myself. I would have to go get help. If it was happening at work, I'd have to talk to my boss and maybe security. You know, if something happened, you know, that I was approached by a family member, it doesn't matter that you're kids. We're not insulting them. We're just giving them the safety plan as soon as we can. We've got kids too that have come to the center, and parents do. They tried to say no, they tried to get away, or they just got tricked. They just got tricked. And the parents saying, I've been telling them since they were 2 years old not to let anybody mess with their private parts. Or then we'll have the parent that goes, I've been telling them, I've been trying, I didn't do a good job. It's not their fault. Even if you started teaching when they were 18 months old, if it happens, it's because they got tricked. There's a new scam on the cell phones that my husband told me about. You get the solicitor, and they're mumbling, and they'll go, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me? And you'll go, yes, yes. And they're taping you. And then they're saying you bought something or did something. Well, we've got it on tape. You know, all the phishing for the medical records, the ransoms. It's just, we're trying to keep up with these people, and it's very hard to keep up with them. They're very organized. Runaways are typically kids that there's been some form of abuse that's happened in their home. They run away. They might have $67 on them, and they think that's going to last. But when the money runs out, that's when the human traffickers are going to them. So we try to tell kids, if there's problems at home, there are people you can go to. You don't have to run and put yourself in that vulnerable situation. They'll watch kids at the mall, and maybe there's a kid that's isolated, and all the other girls or guys leave them and go off, and they just target. So kids will talk to me about stranger danger, and I'll tell them that you need to remember everything about stranger danger. And remember those plans, because it's important. But what Ms. Deb is mostly talking about are people that you know. Who else?
When are the books used?
I give the books out at the schools. So 4th and 5th grade gets the storybook. It's Birthdays, Boundaries, and Body Safeties. There's the caregiver guide in it. And I brought extra because I figured, if y'all came today, y'all might just need your own set. Even though your child should be bringing one home. And in the story, it's her birthday. And she's driving with her mom. And they just start talking about personal space and surprises and secrets and things like that. And then she goes into your bathing suit covers your private parts. The situation this little girl is in is just uncomfortable. And a lady that she loves at church kisses her on the cheek every Sunday and leaves big red lipstick on her face. So, and I stress that too with the kids. It doesn't have to be somebody's messing with your private parts. It's any uncomfortable situation. Please go to your trusted adults and talk to them about it. Preschools started asking us to come. and this book was too wordy. And so we took that book and kind of broke it down into 4 shorter stories, and it just hits personal space. Do you know the private property rules? And it's about, it's your property. The I can plan, try to say no, try to get away, tell someone it's not your fault, and just talking to kids about their feelings. My granddaughter drives me crazy. She wants to read these all the time. It's like, I've been doing this all day, kid. But she loves them. And she has no idea that, I'm part of this. And then she'll see them in the car. And the other day, she was in her car seat, and I heard something. I said, "What are you doing, Ellie?" And she goes, "I'm looking at these books that are back here with my bears that you have." So those are and then with the older kids, we just give out a fact sheet. Just 1 in 10 will experience some form of sexual abuse. Bait and lures are used to trick them. Sexual abusers, most of the time it's someone that you know. Child abusers can be men, women, teenage boys or girls, even kids. They want you to keep it a secret. We tell kids to follow their gut feeling. We'll talk about that. And then it just has the same plan. That you can't handle this yourself, please go to a trusted adult. And then based on what the school wants us to do, we'll have some facts about human trafficking, and then we'll have some resources. The fire departments are safe places. Crisis center, they can call the hotline and talk to crisis center, things like that. The 10th graders, we will address, and I'm very careful with my wording. If you're a senior and you're dating a freshman and there's any sort of sexual activity going on, that is considered illegal. We will address with 7th graders and the 10th graders inappropriate images. So if they're taking pictures of themselves and sending it, or if other people are sending it out. I like to hear stories when I go to conferences, because a lot of numbers don't stick with me. So I'll just tell them stories. And one is a girl that she made a bad choice. She was trying to get this boy to like her that was on the baseball team. So she took pictures of her, private parts, sent it to him. What do you think he did with them? They know this stuff. And he sent it out. But they don't know if it crossed the state line. Any picture that was taken, or once you put it on the internet, it's a federal offense. Now, do we want to put 10th graders in jail? No, we just want them to know. But what happened to this girl is when she graduated and went to college and tried to get in a sorority, the pictures resurfaced. So this sorority girl sent them to this sorority, and then they were breaking the law too, because they were sending these pictures out. So 7th and high school, we'll talk to them, just the ramifications of that. I did have one 10th grader, he was an IB student, and just on it, and we got to that part of the program, and it was like he forgot that there were other people in the room, and yeah, it's amazing. And he picked up his phone, and he said, "So Miss Deb, you mean to tell me the pictures I have of myself on my phone and the images of my girlfriend, like that's illegal for me to have?" And I'm like, "Yeah, if you're underage, then it's illegal." So even though it's on my phone, and then finally his teacher, it was the funniest thing, his teacher goes, "Man, you're going to jail." And it was like, no, we're not here to put kids in jail. We're here to just teach them how, these images, they don't go away. And then I tell my older kids, this is true, a guy was arrested overseas in Switzerland. He had all these inappropriate images on his computer, so law enforcement confiscated the computer. There was a girl that appeared to be about 4, and behind her was an the University of Alabama blanket hanging behind her. So the law enforcement authorities in Switzerland said, "Oh, this kid might still be in danger. She could be from, Alabama." People talked. Law enforcement talked with each other. They identified her. She's in her 20s. But that image when she was 4 had been floating around and bought and sold that long. And that's what they don't get. And they think if they Snapchat it, then it's gone. And I tell them, I said, y'all don't know how many Snapchats my daughter got, and she would do a screenshot and show it to me later. They're like, ooh, a bad pictures, Miss Deb? And I'm like, no, it wasn't bad stuff. But just, you think it's gone, but it still can be in someone else's hands. So we talk about that kind of stuff. Yes?
You may have said this, but how, like for the second, fourth, seventh, do you come once, do you come twice, and then you talk to the whole grade at one time, or do you divide it up, smaller groups?
No,
How is
that's a
that?
great question. So how are the groups set up? Reality, the best case scenario, we're talking to one classroom at a time. It makes it easier for me to hear. It makes it easier for the kids to participate. My colleague that does this with me has become extremely ill, so I'm by myself. And then I also have the executive director services that I'm supposed to be doing. So the schools have graciously this fall, they're doubling up. So I'll be seeing 2 second grades at the same time. But most days I have an intern with me, and then there'll always be someone from the school, a certified person from the school in there too, just to, help gauge things. And, if we get
So two
loud,
classes.
2 classes.
And then you'll go like twice for second grade,
Yeah.
twice for fourth
So
grade.
they'll see me once, that build a little bit of rapport, we kind of start the stuff, and then I usually try to get the one scenario in, if they're ready, if they're able to say the plan and, things like that, and we get loud. We're rowdy, and that's part of the reason I have to remind them of the rules of the school. So when like the other class is leaving or whatever. So typically, what we did at Homewood, based on where I was, one class, second grade might be on the floor, and then the kids that it's their room might be in the seat, or they might move me to a bigger space. I might go to the counseling room. And that's when I'm challenged with, they all want to help. But it's like, that's too many people. So I try to do some big group scenarios that everybody feels like they're involved in. And not making anyone participate that doesn't want to.
And they each go home with the books.
Yes, and then when the teacher's able to, then the books will come home. Did I answer that? Okay. Who else? Then I ask them at the end, has anybody ever talked to you about this before? And a lot of them will say yes. And I'll ask them who? My mommy. We learned about this at Girl Scouts or whatever. They'll say stuff. And then I'll ask them if they feel like they have a plan now or they know more. And then I ask them if they feel like they'll use it. And Miss McKinney was in a different school district, and she's seen me present numerous times. And yeah, we taught kindergarten through 5th grade at the school she was at before. And they're just fun, and then they're just empowered. And then since we've been doing, when we get ready to do the practicing, when I'm letting the kids that are up helping me, give them a minute to figure out what they're gonna say, and I get the audience, they say it 3 times, and it's like, I think I can, but we'll go, find your power, find your power, find your power. And that's what this is all about, because they feel powerless when they're in these uncomfortable or abusive situations. And we just want them to know they've always got the power to tell.
Have you ever had a situation where a child will tell you right then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what do you do to deal with that?
We handle that very carefully. I had one the other day. He was in 2nd grade and raised his hand and said, well, you said it could be a girl? And I said, yeah, and he said, and you said it could be a girl a little bit older than you, and he's in 2nd grade, and he said, what if she was 13? That age difference is disturbing. So I said, wow, thank you for letting me, know that. And yes, you're right, that would be a time that you would need to tell. And then we dismissed, and I just asked, and the teacher was there too, and it had happened when he was in kindergarten. They've moved, he told his uncle, so I just empowered him and thanked him I was like, wow, even in kindergarten, look at you. You knew to go, let your uncle know. But it was something he was still thinking about. I had another second grader, it was the first school we went to this year. He came and talked to me afterward. And his dad had bought him a book. And I'm going to say it wrong because I have a mental block. The Japanese cartoons. Say it loud for me. Anime. Why do I have a mental block about that? Anime. And he said when he got to chapter 2, the book was inappropriate. Now, I didn't think the dad read that book. And this was in September, the beginning of September. And so he said, I don't want my dad to get in trouble. And I don't want to be in trouble because I read part of it before I realized. And so I just reassured him, he's not in trouble. I don't think your dad knew, your dad's not in trouble. And then this was the disturbing part for me. I said, what'd you do with the book? And he goes, I hid it in my room. And I said, when did this happen? And he said, in June. And I was like, this poor baby's been worried about this from June to September. That, so I talked to the counselor. We made a plan that he was going to just let his parents know that night, and she was going to follow up with him the next day. And a lot of times they'll say, I tell you, Miss Deb, I'll tell you, but I remind them I'm only going to be at their school maybe 2 days, so I try to help them figure out something. But yeah, we do, I have kids that in the middle will raise their hands, and that's when I learned too. We had another child that it was her uncle, and he was developmentally delayed. And so yeah, I try to stress it can be anybody, and that she didn't tell because she knew he had special needs. And then we, worked with her and notified the family and things like that. Yeah.
I just wanted to commend you for what you're doing.
Oh,
This
thank
is so
you.
important, and I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I've worked with several nonprofits that fight sexual exploitation, one in particular in DC, and we do pornography prevention education in schools, and we know that child sex abuse, one of the primary components is exposure to pornography.
Yep.
And I work with sexual abuse victims, children who are addicted to pornography, and all the in between. And so this is so key. And I'm grateful that you mentioned exposure to inappropriate pictures, because kids need to understand it's not a matter of if they're going to be exposed; it's a matter of when they're exposed. And for them to have a plan of saying, "Okay, I can reject this."
Yes.
Helps them because they're traumatized by it.
When we practice, when it's the birthday party and the mom goes to get the snacks and the big brother comes in, and they'll be watching Frozen or Zootopia. And this is all, we're just, pretending. And he takes it out, tells them they're babies, that's a baby movie, and puts the inappropriate images in. And we talk about what they could do, because some kids, even though we're just practicing, they'll go like this. They'll cover their eyes, and then that was the scenario that kids, that they wouldn't tell when they got home because they watched it. I mean, they're curious about it. And it's like, what is that? Oh, wait. And it's kind of like a car accident or a train wreck. You shouldn't look, but you're like, oh, even when, and that's why the traffic slowed down, because there's, people rubbernecking. And the same thing happens to these kids, yes. Yeah. So we try to address that, because it is more than just touching.
Is the plan to, I know that this is kind of new, I guess, for Vestavia to take on, but is the plan, like, if, you're only doing second, fourth, and sixth, so would you come back next year? Because, like, there would be children.
To hit other
that
ages?
get missed.
What we've done, and then we'll leave it up to the schools and the counselors, these books, the hospital graciously has made into videos. And so the alternate years, the video can be shown, or there's other agencies that, can talk, or, and that's what we need, because like I said, this is so much information, and that's why I'm so happy you're here, because I can't do this by myself. I need the schools and at home to also be, but I also know from being a parent, sometimes when I'm talking to my kids, so they're hearing like, Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. But when some crazy lady from Children's Hospital is coming and acting all silly and putting hats on and whatever, that can help. I used to talk to my kids about uncomfortable things in the car. because they're buckled in. I could, control, and I didn't have to make eye contact if I didn't want to. But, I could look in the rearview mirror, and that's when I would talk to them about stuff. My 2 older ones, we had a lovely surprise 19 and a half years ago, and they knew enough about babies being born, but I didn't know how much they knew, and so I'm dreading, this conversation, and yeah, they knew more than I thought they knew, because they learned it from the neighbors. But I was having that conversation, with them about the baby being born in the car, so I didn't have to look at them. So, it's a hard subject, but if you take these books home and you go, all right now, Ellie, we're going to talk about bad people that want to hurt you and mess with your private parts, and then you're going to be ruined for the rest of your life. That's not how we approach it. So even if the books come home and they don't want to look at them that night, don't make them. And they don't have to look at all of them at once. Just throw one or, one in the pile of books that, you might be looking at that week. And then they might pull them off the shelf in 6 months. And you're like, oh, here we go again. We're talking about this again. Times to teach. If there's something on the news, if you see an Amber Alert as you're driving, even though that might be stranger danger, Amber Alerts are usually people that kids know that take them. So that's the opportune time. Or you're at the park and you see, it might be an innocent situation, but your gut feeling goes off, or your mom or grandma instinct goes off. That's a teachable moment. What if? What if? Kids that watch Criminal Minds, they what if question me to death. And because they're exposed to it. But usually on the TV shows it's a stranger. So we try to, but what if, you've always got the power to tell. Even if it happened on Friday night and you were not able to get help till you got to school on Monday morning. Or it happened on Saturday with the babysitter and you fell asleep before mom and dad got home. What can you do Sunday? We can still tell, Miss Deb. I've taken more time than I'm supposed to, but just look at the clock. Are y'all okay? Are you feeling better? Is anybody still anxious? Are you still anxious?
No, it's so huge.
It is huge. It is huge, and I've been doing this since the 90s, and I get anxious before every class I teach because I want to do it right. And I'm graciously allowed to do this, and so that anxiety, if I start being real lackadaisical about it, it's time for me to retire. But I get hepped up and I get, sweaty when we're doing, because I just want it to be right. And I want them to walk out of there feeling like they've got a plan if they need it. Y'all good? Thank y'all for being here today. I appreciate it.